For 900 years, no Jedi alive can match what Yoda could do with the Force. He sat at the head of the Jedi Order through the rise of the Old Republic, the Mandalorian Wars, the ancient Sith conflicts, and finally the Clone Wars. Every other Jedi Master in the galaxy answered to him, and the reason had nothing to do with politics. The clearest proof of that power came in the final hours of the Republic. That proof lives in the Revenge of the Sith novel by Matthew Stover, in the duel between Yoda and Darth Sidious inside the Senate chamber on Coruscant. The book describes the encounter as more than two combatants meeting. When the green and red blades crossed, Stover writes, the duel was the expression of the fundamental conflict of the universe itself. Light against dark, winner take all. Of every Jedi alive at the end of the Clone Wars, Yoda was the only one the Order considered capable of standing across from Sidious as an equal at full strength. What Sidious could do at full strength shows up most clearly in the Legends comic Dark Empire by Tom Veitch. In that comic, the Sith Lord tears open hyperspace itself, generating what the Sith call a Force Storm. The storms are not just weather, they are wormholes, capable of pulling entire fleets into themselves and depositing them somewhere else in the galaxy or destroying them entirely. Sidious at his peak could generate them at will. The master who matched him was the small green Jedi who had run the Order for nearly a millennium. His combat skill was just as far above what other Jedi could do. He carried a green-bladed lightsaber, shorter than a standard hilt to suit his small frame, and used it through a personal variant of the fourth lightsaber form, Ataru. Ataru is the most acrobatic of the 7 forms, built around speed, rotation, and constant motion. In Yoda's own hands, the form became a style nobody knew how to predict. The Stover novel describes him in the same fight against Sidious as moving through the air faster than the eye could follow, redirecting Force lightning back into its source, and parrying blade strokes with a one-handed grip on a hilt smaller than his opponent's forearm. He used the same form in his only on-screen duel with Count Dooku, a Sith Lord who had been Yoda's own student before falling. Dooku was, by Sidious's own assessment, one of the most skilled lightsaber duelists alive. In the Revenge of the Sith novel, when Dooku is described as wielding the Force on a universal level, it places him near the top of the Sith hierarchy of his era. Yoda had taught that to the Sith, and when they met on Geonosis, the older master drove him off the field. The list of Force abilities he could use was longer than almost any other Jedi's. Beyond raw telekinesis, the Stover novel and the Legends novel Yoda Dark Rendezvous by Sean Stewart attribute him with the full standard list a Jedi Master at his level commanded, plus several abilities that almost no other Jedi could perform safely. He used Force Lightning Absorption, a technique the Order called Tudominus, and turned the energy back at the user instead of grounding it. He used Force Valor, an old battlefield ability that strengthened every Jedi within range of him. He could read the future clearly enough that the Order routinely brought him strategic decisions, specifically to consult his foresight before acting on them. In Dark Rendezvous, set in the middle of the Clone Wars, Stewart writes Yoda as a Jedi who had spent so long training others that the line between his own mind and the minds of his students had effectively dissolved. He could feel a Padawan's emotional state from across the room, sometimes from across a planet. He read the Force as easily as other masters read maps. The novel frames his approach to combat the same way. He didn't plan duels ahead of time. He saw where his opponent was about to strike before the strike happened. That kind of foresight is also what made him the Order's most trusted strategic mind. He had been a master long before any other Jedi alive had been born. The Clone Wars source books across both Canon and Legends place his age at over 800 years by the start of the war and over 900 by the end. He had personally trained generations of Jedi. The list runs across the entire galaxy, including Mace Windu in the early stages of his career, and almost every initiate who passed through the Coruscant Temple in the modern era. Most of the masters who fought in the Clone Wars had been taught by him at some point in their training. The novel by Stewart goes further. It describes Yoda as the only Jedi alive who had personally seen the Sith Empire of the ancient era. He had walked through the Order's archives when those archives were still being expanded, had read source documents most masters of the late Republic only knew through summaries, and had survived encounters with darkside users that the Order had stopped recording in its formal histories because the public versions of those events had been classified. That depth of experience made him different from every other master on the Council. Mace Windu was the Order's combat philosopher, Obi-Wan Kenobi was its diplomat, Anakin Skywalker was its strongest active warrior, but Yoda was something none of them were. He was the Jedi the others went to when the situation could not be resolved through any of their other strengths. When Mace Windu and the Council sent the order to war, it was Yoda who led the fleet to Kamino in person. When the Senate fell and the Republic collapsed, it was Yoda who walked into the Senate chamber alone to confront the man who had built the Empire. That power, that experience, and that authority all sat on the shoulders of one Jedi, which makes it all the more striking that the order he led was wiped out on his watch, and that the choices he made over his 900 years contributed directly to its fall.
First, Yoda's rigid dogma left the Jedi blind to the dangers around them. By the time of the prequel era, the Republic had grown corrupt, and the Jedi Order had become overly dogmatic. They became increasingly rigid and disconnected from the realities of the galaxy. They clung to rules and rituals, enforcing a lifestyle of emotional suppression and blind adherence to outdated philosophy. The Jedi Code taught that emotion must give way to peace. It warned that attachment was forbidden because attachment breeds jealousy, which is a shadow of greed. Fear, anger, and hatred had to be stripped from a Jedi's heart. The galaxy had changed, but the Jedi had not. Yet even as the Republic decayed, Yoda remained steadfast in this belief that the Jedi's role was to serve it unquestioningly. He embodied the Jedi Council's faith in ancient codes, often ignoring nuance or new evidence. However, Yoda himself acknowledged that neither the Republic nor the Jedi Order was perfect. Despite this awareness, his actions still reflected a deep trust in the Order's traditions, even when those traditions no longer matched the needs of the galaxy. Any deviation from the code was viewed as a failure of faith, not a flaw in doctrine. This rigidity would soon bring grave consequences. The clearest warning came in 42 BBY, when Count Dooku, one of Yoda's own former Padawans, abandoned the Jedi completely. He did so out of disillusionment with corruption in the Galactic Senate and the perceived complacency of the Jedi. While his departure began as a protest against these flaws, he would eventually embrace the dark side after Qui-Gon Jinn's death at the Battle of Naboo in 32 BBY. When one of your most accomplished students walks away citing your own failures, that's not an accident, but a warning. However, Yoda didn't see it that way. The Council, and he among them, treated his departure as a personal failing rather than a signal of systemic decay. Rather than reflecting on the cracks forming in the Jedi's foundation, Yoda stood firm on his belief. He ensured that the same rigid structure remained unchallenged. This pattern of dismissing criticism and doubling down on tradition defined Yoda's entire approach to leadership. Worse still, Yoda failed to foresee Dooku's fall to the dark side. Dooku became Darth Tyrannus in secret, helping orchestrate the Separatist crisis. Meanwhile, the Grand Master of the Jedi Order, the most powerful Force user in the galaxy, remained unaware that his former Padawan had become a Sith Lord. He only discovered the truth when Dooku revealed his dark powers during the Battle of Geonosis. Such an event demonstrated how the Sith had effectively hidden in plain sight. This was not just a failure of perception, but also reflected the limitations of the system Yoda led. The Clone Wars would later expose just how dangerous this inflexibility had become. When the Clone Wars erupted, the Jedi became generals. They became warriors, leading legions of soldiers bred for battle and fighting a war designed by their enemies. They believed they were serving peace, yet they were puppets in a conflict orchestrated by the Sith. Though Yoda acted with good intentions, his adherence to tradition prevented him from seeing how the Sith had turned the Jedi's own principles against them. Second, his suppression of knowledge created even deeper vulnerabilities. The archives grew thicker, yet carefully filtered over the centuries. Holocrons, Sith artifacts, and ancient texts required council permission and clearance levels. While canon confirms that certain dark-side texts and Sith artifacts were restricted to Jedi Masters, there is no direct evidence that Yoda personally removed Sith holocrons from the archives. However, he did advocate caution in studying them. Furthermore, he treated these crucial pieces of knowledge as too dangerous or incomprehensible for minds he deemed weak. His intent may have been noble, but in doing so, he restrained the very curiosity that once defined the Jedi. His students faced the galaxy half blind, while their enemies studied freely. Within the council chambers, even the Masters themselves lacked full information. As a result, the Jedi knew of the Sith only through ancient doctrine. They believed the dark side to be eternal, something that could be defeated through discipline. Master Yoda never considered that understanding darkness might be the only defense against it. When a vision of Order 66 began to surface, Yoda dismissed them, a decision that would cost thousands of Jedi their lives. Early in the Clone Wars, Yoda meditated on Kashyyyk and received an unclear vision through the Force. It showed him Clone Trooper Jekk's emotions shifting from disbelief to an overpowering need to obey some unknown command. The meaning was vague, more feeling than image. Yet even this fragment hinted at something deeply wrong with the clones. Yoda's skepticism about visions prevented him from realizing the true importance of what he had seen. He took no action. He told no one. He didn't investigate the clones or question why the Force would show him this specific future. Instead, he buried the warning and continued leading the Jedi into battle alongside the very soldiers who would eventually execute them. But everything changed when ARC Trooper 5's uncovered physical evidence that could have prevented the massacre. The warnings kept coming. When the Jedi Council learned that Count Dooku had secretly commissioned the clone army, alarm bells should have been deafening. The Sith created your military. The enemy designed the troops you command. Every strategic instinct should have screamed danger. But Yoda vouched for the clones anyway. At his insistence, the Council testified to the clones' loyalty and actively concealed Dooku's role in their creation. Yoda believed the Republic would panic if the truth leaked, so he chose deception over transparency. He chose political stability over the safety of his own order. Then came the inhibitor chips. When ARC Trooper 5's uncovered the truth about control chips implanted in every clone's brain, he brought evidence directly to the Jedi. This mechanism would allow clones to be turned against their Jedi commanders. 5's risked everything to deliver this warning. He died trying to expose the conspiracy. Still, the Council, led by Yoda, accepted the cover story. When Clone Trooper Tup experienced a malfunction that caused him to execute his Jedi general, the Jedi were told it was caused by a virus, not the chips. The Council stressed that the inhibitor chips in every clone's brain were necessary for stability and nothing more. They disregarded 5's warnings about a larger conspiracy and took no steps to remove the chips. Once again, Yoda chose to trust the system over the evidence in front of him. Even after ignoring this evidence, Yoda continued to receive warnings. When he secluded himself on Dagobah seeking answers from the Force, he saw Order 66 again in another vision. The Force was screaming at him and showing him the catastrophic future. Yet neither he nor the Council fully pieced it together in time. The dark side had clouded their vision. Then came the moment Yoda had been warned about, and the consequences were beyond comprehension. When Palpatine issued the command, clones across the galaxy turned on their Jedi commanders in an instant. On Megiddo, clones blasted Ki-Adi-Mundi from behind, cutting him down mid-stride. On Cato Neimoidia, Plo Koon's fighter exploded in the sky, shot down by the pilots who had flown beside him through countless battles. On Seleucami, Stas Ali was vaporized by her own speeder escort. On Felucia, Aayla Secura was surrounded by clones she had fought beside for years, and they executed her without hesitation. Across the galaxy, thousands of Jedi fell in minutes. Masters who had survived years of brutal warfare died in seconds, while Padawans were gunned down before they could even understand what was happening. Even in the Jedi Temple, home to the Order for 1,000 generations, became a slaughterhouse. Darth Vader and clone troopers turned on everyone inside, even the younglings, who were cut down despite looking to the Jedi for protection. Order 66 succeeded beyond Palpatine's wildest dreams. The massacre was total. The efficiency was perfect. Yoda had some warnings, the suspicious origin of the clone army, 5's claims of a conspiracy, yet neither he nor the Council fully pieced it together in time. The dark side had clouded their vision, and Sidious's plan happened before they could prevent it. As Order 66 unfolded, Darth Sidious bragged to Yoda that he had waited a long time for this moment, and that, at last, the Jedi were no more, and And he was right. The Jedi weren't defeated by superior force or overwhelming power. They were destroyed by their own leader's refusal to act on the warnings he received multiple times. Yet perhaps Yoda's most devastating failure came not from what he ignored, but from what he taught. For Yoda, emotion was the root of all downfall. Fear led to anger, anger to hate, and hate to suffering. This teaching, rooted in the Jedi Code, guided the Order for centuries. To him, these weren't just guidelines. They were absolute truths that could never be questioned. But in practice, it stripped the Jedi of what made them human. When Anakin Skywalker came to him in 19 BBY, terrified by visions of Padme dying in childbirth, Yoda's response revealed the fatal flaw in his philosophy. Anakin was desperate. He was seeing the woman he loved dying, and he needed guidance on how to save her while staying true to Jedi principles. But Yoda offered no empathy, no understanding, and no acknowledgement that Anakin's fears might be valid. Instead, he warned Anakin that he must be careful when sensing the future, because the fear of loss is a path to the dark side. He told Anakin to train himself to let go of everything he feared to lose. It was the emotional equivalent of leaving someone alone in their darkest moment. Anakin wasn't asking Yoda to help him avoid attachment. He was asking for help protecting someone he loved. And Yoda told him to accept her death before it even happened. His cold response would push Anakin directly into the arms of a Sith Lord. This advice wasn't just unhelpful, it was actively destructive. Yoda's uncompromising stance left Anakin completely isolated. He had nowhere else to turn within the Jedi Order. No one would help him. No one would even acknowledge that his fears were legitimate. So, Anakin turned to the only person who offered him answers, Palpatine. The Sith Lord recognized Anakin's desperation and exploited it perfectly. He offered Anakin hope through dark side power, claiming it could save those he loved from death. He gave Anakin what Yoda refused to provide, a path forward that didn't require him to abandon everyone he cared about. And when Anakin stood at the crossroads between light and dark, he remembered Yoda's cold dismissal and chose Palpatine's false promises instead. The result was immediate and far-reaching. Anakin knelt before Palpatine and became Darth Vader. He led the clone assault on the Jedi Temple, cutting down Jedi he had fought beside during the Clone Wars. He murdered younglings who looked to him for protection. He traveled to Mustafar and slaughtered the Separatist leadership, tying up Palpatine's loose ends. And when Obi-Wan confronted him, Anakin had become so consumed by the dark side that he tried to kill his own master and closest friend. Padme died anyway. The very thing Anakin fell to the dark side to prevent happened regardless, and Vader spent the next 2 decades as Palpatine's enforcer, hunting down the surviving Jedi and crushing any spark of rebellion across the galaxy. Every atrocity Vader committed, every Jedi he hunted, every innocent life he destroyed traces back to that moment when Yoda told Anakin to let go instead of offering real help. The Jedi Code teaches that attachment leads to the dark side. Anakin's fall seemed to prove this, but it wasn't the attachment itself that corrupted him. It was the Jedi Order's refusal to acknowledge attachment as part of being human. Yoda's doctrine created a trap: feel nothing or fall to darkness. There was no middle ground, no attachments, no understanding that love itself could be a source of strength. Despite this tragedy, Master Yoda learned nothing. 20 years later, Luke Skywalker arrived on Dagobah with the same passionate nature as his father. Yoda immediately labeled Luke impatient, reckless, and too much like Anakin. The Jedi Master tried to compress decades worth of training into weeks in Luke, all while concealing crucial information from him, the true identity of Darth Vader. In the middle of training, Luke experienced visions of his friends suffering. When he wanted to take action, history repeated itself exactly. Yoda demanded that he abandon them so he could complete his training. The same cold doctrine that drove Anakin to darkness now pushed Luke toward the same cliff. Yet Luke refused. He left Dagobah against Yoda's wishes. He went to save his friends. And later, when he faced Darth Vader on the second Death Star, he made a choice that defied everything Yoda had taught him. He threw away his lightsaber and refused to kill his father. That choice, the one Yoda told him not to make, saved Anakin Skywalker. and destroyed the Sith. Luke's love for his father redeemed Vader. His loyalty to his friends inspired the rebellion. His emotional connections became the foundation of a new Jedi Order that would surpass the old. All the traits Yoda saw as weaknesses in his students were what made Luke successful in defeating the Empire. Only Luke's rejection of Yoda's philosophy, his choice of compassion over detachment, ultimately brought balance to the Force. In the end, Yoda never understood that attachment could be a Jedi's strength. He spent 900 years perfecting a teaching philosophy that created its own failures. He produced technically skilled warriors who crumbled under emotional pressure. He trained powerful Force users who turned to darkness rather than face their own feelings. Yoda's failures weren't accidents. It was his own wisdom that doomed the very galaxy he'd been saving for centuries. The galaxy paid the price. The Republic fell while the Empire rose. Yoda spent decades hiding on Dagobah instead of taking responsibility for his role in the catastrophe. The final proof that Yoda's way was wrong came when Luke Skywalker saved the galaxy by practicing compassion. Attachment redeemed Vader. Love destroyed the Emperor. What Yoda said would lead to darkness became the light that saved everyone.
After the Order fell and the Empire took the galaxy, Yoda walked away from everything he had built and disappeared into a swamp on the edge of known space. The planet he chose was not the random hideout it looked like, and the choice he made years before Order 66 turned out to be the only reason the Empire never found him.
According to canon sources, particularly the Clone Wars series, Yoda first visited Dagobah during the war, years before Order 66. He did not find the planet through charts or military reports, and instead, the spirit of Qui-Gon Jinn guided him there. Qui-Gon had learned to keep his mind alive after passing, and through his power, he could speak with the living under certain conditions. During an important time in the war, he reached out to Yoda with a mission that would change the course of the Grand Master's life. The instructions were strict and left no room for doubt. Yoda had to travel alone. He could not tell the Jedi Council where he was going, and he could not bring anyone with him or record his route. These rules seemed extreme, but Qui-Gon made it clear that the secrecy was necessary for everything that would follow. Yoda, the leader of the entire Jedi Order, obeyed without question. He left Coruscant without explanation. When he landed on Dagobah, he found a world that was nothing like what he expected. The planet was not calm, but instead filled with predators, poisonous plants, and ground soft enough to swallow a ship whole. Thick fog covered everything, and the air was heavy with moisture. Dangerous creatures lurked in every shadow, and survival required constant awareness. Yet, Qui-Gon's spirit called Dagobah pure. This description seemed to go against everything Yoda could see around him. The swamp was hostile in every way, and nothing about it suggested purity or peace. But Qui-Gon was not speaking about the surface conditions. He was speaking about the Force. The Force worked differently there. The living Force, which flows through all creatures, was very strong on Dagobah, and life grew everywhere, wild and aggressive. Every corner of the planet was filled with living things fighting to survive and grow. At the same time, the cosmic force, which connects all things across time and space, also gathered there with unusual strength. These two parts of the Force rarely came together with such strength in one place. Because of this, Dagobah was not peaceful, but flooded with energy. This created something no other planet could offer. The Force on Dagobah did not behave normally, and instead created a kind of noise, a constant, very strong signal that drowned out everything else. On most worlds, a trained Force user could sense individual beings, track movements, and detect emotions. On Dagobah, all of that became impossible because the background energy was simply too loud. For a Jedi trying to disappear, this noise was more useful than any fortress. The Jedi Council never learned about Dagobah. Yoda returned to Coruscant and went back to his duties without saying where he had been. No one questioned his absence, and no one pressed him for details. The war continued, the Senate grew more corrupt, and Palpatine's power grew with each passing month. Through all of it, Yoda kept the planet secret, telling no one what he had found or why it mattered. This choice proved important after Order 66. When the Republic fell and the Empire rose from its ashes, Yoda already knew exactly where to go. He did not need to search for a hiding place or scramble to find safety. He had one ready, a location prepared years in advance for exactly this moment. His return to Dagobah after the fall was simple. He just left, slipping away from the chaos without drawing attention. No pursuit followed, no Imperial forces tracked him, and no Inquisitors sensed his presence because the Force itself seemed to swallow him whole. Yoda vanished as completely as if he had never existed. Imperial scanners could detect life signs and energy signals across huge distances, making it nearly impossible for anyone to hide for long. But Dagobah created so much living and Force activity that sensors could not pick out individual readings. The data came back as a jumbled mess with no clear patterns, and any officer looking at a scan of Dagobah would see chaos and move on to the next target. As shown in The Empire Strikes Back, Luke Skywalker experienced this firsthand when he arrived years later. His X-Wing's instruments became unreliable on approach, giving readings that made no sense. Navigation failed and pointed him in the wrong direction. Targeting computers gave information that did not match what his eyes could see. Because of this, Luke crashed into the swamp since his technology simply could not handle what Dagobah was showing it. The planet broke his equipment before he even landed. The Emperor and Vader were among the most powerful Force users in history. They commanded fleets and armies of hunters dedicated to wiping out every trace of the Old Order. They found and ended Jedi on dozens of worlds, tracking them across the galaxy with patience and skill. However, they never found Yoda. Dagobah removed him from the awareness of everyone who might have looked for him. For 20 years, the greatest Jedi in history lived in a swamp, and his most powerful enemies never knew. The dark side played a key role in making this possible. Dagobah contains something that should have made it wrong for any Jedi, a cave filled with dark side energy. The cave existed long before Yoda arrived, and its origins remain unclear even now. What is clear is that it sent out darkness all the time, giving off a signal that any Force user could detect from far away. The dark side radiated from that cave like heat from a fire, impossible to miss for anyone with the ability to sense it. For most Jedi, this would be a reason to stay away. Dark side places drew Sith attention because they were useful for dark side training and practices. They could also change anyone who stayed too long, slowly pulling them toward dark influence and twisted thinking. A Jedi seeking safety would normally avoid such locations at all costs. Yoda made the opposite choice. He settled near the cave on purpose, building his small hut close enough that the cave's energy surrounded him at all times. Every day, he lived within reach of that darkness. This was not an accident or a matter of convenience, but a carefully made plan with a specific goal in mind. The Darkside Cave was not a danger to Yoda, but his main defense. According to various Star Wars sources about Imperial Inquisitors, these hunters tracked Jedi using the Force itself. They were trained to sense the light side and follow it to its source. When a Jedi acted with kindness or used their powers to help others, they created a ripple in the Force, and that ripple could be traced back to them like footprints in snow. Lightside energy left trails that skilled hunters could follow. The more a Jedi behaved like a Jedi, showing compassion, protecting the innocent, using their abilities for good, the easier they became to find. Many Jedi fell because they could not stop themselves from helping people, and each act of kindness gave the Inquisitors another clue. Dagobah's Darkside Cave solved this problem completely. Because of this, Yoda's energy, no matter how strong, vanished into the noise created by the cave. It was like trying to hear a whisper in the middle of a thunderstorm. The smaller sound simply could not be detected. The process worked like opposite electrical charges. Light and dark existed in tension, with each able to cancel out the other under the right conditions. Yoda placed himself at the exact spot where his light side signal and the cave's dark side output balanced out. The two energies met and canceled each other out, and where Yoda stood, the Force registered as neutral, neither light nor dark, just empty space. Yoda understood how the energies worked and used that knowledge to create his own disappearance. The Emperor knew about Darkside locations since he had visited many during his rise to power. He understood their value and their dangers. When Imperial forces scanned Dagobah and detected the cave's signal, they reached a simple conclusion. The planet was useless, because no Jedi would choose to live near such darkness. The very thing that should have attracted attention became the reason no one investigated. That belief kept Yoda's enemies away for 2 decades. The plan worked exactly as Yoda intended. However, living near the Darkside Cave for 20 years came with a cost that could not be avoided. The cave did not just send out energy, but affected everyone within range. Visions came to those who lived nearby, often showing painful truths or possible futures. Emotional pressure built over time, pushing against the mind and testing strength. These effects touched anyone who stayed close to the cave, and Yoda was no exception. For the Empire, Dagobah remained a dead end throughout their reign. Scanners showed nothing useful. Force detection found only a cave, and no records suggested the planet mattered in any way. Officers who reviewed the data saw a worthless swamp world and moved their attention elsewhere. The protection worked exactly as planned, but the cave demanded something else from Yoda in return, something far more personal than simple exposure to dark side energy. Dagobah was not the place where Yoda waited in comfort, but a place of constant challenge, not with enemies, but with himself. The protection the planet offered came at a cost, and that cost was paid in suffering. According to the Clone Wars series, the cave showed Yoda Order 66 before it happened, clone troopers turning on their generals, the temple burning, his students falling across dozens of worlds. He returned to Coruscant knowing what was coming, yet he could not stop it. Yoda did not flee to Dagobah to escape something unexpected or to hide from a surprise attack. Instead, he retreated to a place that had already showed him his failure in clear detail. Every day on that planet reminded him that he had received warnings and still could not prevent what happened. The common view of Yoda's exile treats it as survival, a smart retreat to stay alive for future resistance. Yoda hid so well that Jedi would not be completely wiped out, and his survival preserved hope for the future. This explanation makes sense on the surface, but the cave's visions suggest something more personal was happening. Yoda accepted responsibility for what happened to the Jedi Order. The Grand Master, who had trained Jedi for centuries, watched his order fall because he could not act on the warnings he received. That weight settled on him and never lifted. Dagobah was not about hiding from the Empire, but about carrying that weight. Yoda could have chosen an easier world, but he picked a location that forced him to face his guilt every day. The cave did not show him temptation or promises of power. It showed him truths he did not want to see. The students he had failed to save, the warnings he had dismissed, the pride that had blinded the Jedi to the Sith among them. Most Jedi would have resisted, but Yoda survived by accepting what the cave showed him. Over 20 years, the weight of his failure changed from burden to foundation. He learned from it, drawing wisdom from the pain, and that understanding shaped how he would eventually train Luke Skywalker. Luke would come to Dagobah carrying his own doubts, his own weaknesses, and his own potential for failure. He needed a teacher who understood what it meant to fall short and keep going anyway. Yoda's exile gave him something no comfortable hiding place could have provided: the experience of being broken and rebuilt. The price of the shield was 20 years of facing his worst moments, and he paid it willingly. He returned to Dagobah knowing what waited for him and accepted the pain, because running to safety while pretending the failure never happened would have been its own kind of giving in. When Luke arrived years later, he faced the same cave. His experience would differ, but the test remained the same. The strongest protection Yoda had was not the Darkside Cave or the Force noise, but absence from records. Technology could be fooled, and the Force could be blocked, but the simplest protection simply does not exist in any database anyone could search. The planet had been erased long before Yoda needed it. According to the Clone Wars, Qui-Gon's instructions during Yoda's first visit required total secrecy. No one could know about Dagobah under any circumstances. The Jedi Council, despite leading the Order and having access to all its secrets, was never told about the planet or Yoda's visit there. This was not a mistake, but a choice made on purpose. This secrecy kept Dagobah outside official records entirely. The Jedi kept detailed files on nearly every system in the galaxy, built over thousands of years of exploration and study. Their archives were among the most complete in existence, containing information that even the Republic government did not have. Any planet in those archives could be accessed by the Empire after the Order fell. When Palpatine's forces took the Jedi Temple, they gained access to everything stored there. Records, maps, member files, and historical data all fell into Imperial hands. Any world that Jedi had visited or studied became known to the Empire. Dagobah avoided this fate because it was never recorded in the first place. The Council did not question its absence since they had no reason to look into a planet they had never heard of. No one can search for what they do not know exists. Even Obi-Wan Kenobi did not know where Yoda went. The two surviving Jedi Masters made a key decision after Order 66. They would separate and go to different parts of the galaxy. They would watch over the Skywalker twins, protecting them from a distance, and they would have no contact with each other until the time was right. This meant neither could give up the other's location, even under pressure. Harsh questioning, mind probes, or simple accidents could not reveal what was not known. Yoda knew Obi-Wan was on Tatooine watching over Luke, but Obi-Wan did not know Yoda was on Dagobah. The one-sided knowledge was on purpose, because if Obi-Wan was captured, he could not give away Yoda's hiding place, since he simply did not have that information. The shared silence protected both planets. Tatooine and Dagobah survived the entire Imperial era without discovery. Luke grew up on one, while Yoda waited on the other, and neither location was found because the needed information existed only in minds that were never captured. The Empire could not force secrets out of people who did not have those secrets, but they could not chase what did not exist in any system they could reach. Luke's journey to Dagobah in The Empire Strikes Back showed how complete the erasure was. He could not find the planet through normal methods because no navigation computer had its location, and no database listed it. Luke reached Dagobah only through Force guidance, a vision that showed him where to go. This was something the Empire could not copy or block because it did not depend on technology or records. The Force itself led Luke to his teacher, going around every system that might have tracked him. Even accidental discovery was stopped. Dagobah stayed hidden throughout the entire reign of the Empire, from the first days of Order 66 to the fall of the Second Death Star. After the Empire fell, the secrecy continued. Luke kept Dagobah's location protected even when there was no longer direct danger. The planet where he trained, where Yoda passed, and where he faced his inner darkness, he did not share its location with the New Republic or anyone else. Dagobah existed only in bits and pieces and rumors, and those who knew where it was could be counted on one hand. The secret remained a secret even after the reason for keeping it had passed. The Jedi Order had fallen partly because it had become too organized. Its knowledge was recorded and stored in systems that could be captured. When the Empire took the Temple, it gained access to almost everything the Jedi had known. That information helped the Empire hunt down survivors for years. Dagobah stood for the opposite approach. It was knowledge that existed only in living memory and could not be taken because it was never written down. When everything fell, the escape route was ready because someone had planned ahead. But Dagobah had one more job to do. Dagobah did not accept visitors without testing them. The planet measured everyone's character through challenges that had nothing to do with fighting or power. Strength with a lightsaber meant nothing there. What mattered was something deeper. Yoda had been chosen for Dagobah, guided there by Qui-Gon's spirit, prepared through visions, and picked for a purpose that took decades to unfold. The planet accepted him because he was meant to be there. Luke Skywalker would not receive the same welcome. Instead, he would be tested. The test began before Luke even met his teacher. According to The Empire Strikes Back, when Luke crashed his X-Wing in the swamp and climbed out, he met what seemed to be a small, strange creature. This being appeared harmless, maybe even foolish, with odd speech patterns and strange behavior. It went through Luke's supplies without asking, made annoying comments, and generally acted like a pest. Dagobah tested Luke through failure. He failed Yoda's first test of patience, then failed to understand the cave's warning about his own darkness, and later failed to lift his X-Wing because his mind had already decided what was impossible. Eventually, visions of his friends in danger pulled him away because his training was complete, and he rushed off to face Vader, paying the price for that choice. Yet Dagobah's true test was never about any single failure. It was whether Luke would return after failing so completely, and he did. Humbled and aware of how much he still did not know, he came back to finish what he started. That willingness to face failure and keep going was what mattered most. On this final visit, Yoda completed his training and passed on, knowing the last Jedi had been trained.
Dagobah was not the only secret Yoda kept. For 900 years, the most documented Jedi in the Order's history refused to tell anyone, including the Council, where he came from. His homeworld and his species were never recorded, and the silence was deliberate.
The first proof of Yoda's secrecy comes from the Jedi archives themselves. Every Jedi who joined the Order had their homeworld recorded in their official file. This was standard procedure, documented across multiple sources. The archives maintain comprehensive records on thousands of Jedi across generations, cataloging species, origins, and backgrounds as part of their institutional memory. From youngling to Padawan to Knight, every Jedi's file included their planet of origin, and the system was designed to be complete. Yet when you search for Yoda's entry, the homeworld field is blank. In every official reference book that catalogs Jedi and their backgrounds, Yoda's species is listed simply as unknown, and his homeworld receives that same designation. This isn't an oversight or a gap in the records, as the Jedi archives were meticulous and obsessively complete. Jocasta Nu, the chief librarian, famously declared in Attack of the Clones that if something didn't appear in the archives, it simply didn't exist, and she spoke with absolute confidence in the system's completeness. Yoda's blank entry becomes even more striking considering his position. The Grand Master sat on the Jedi Council for centuries, trained thousands of Jedi, and was arguably the most documented individual in the entire Order's history, with records of his teachings, his missions, and his guidance spanning 800 years. The absence of Yoda's homeworld in a system designed to record every Jedi's origins points to only one conclusion: intentional omission. Someone with the authority and access to manipulate those records ensured that information never appeared, or was quietly removed long before anyone alive would ever remember it existed. And given Yoda's position at the very top of the Jedi hierarchy, he would have had both the authority and the opportunity to make that happen. The second piece of evidence goes beyond hiding information. In Legends continuity, he actively exploited the archive's vulnerabilities for his own protection. According to Revenge of the Sith, the visual dictionary, Dagobah was among the planets erased from the Jedi archives. In Legends sources, Yoda discovered that 38 worlds had been deleted from the archive database, their entries completely scrubbed from the system. When he needed a place to hide after Order 66, when the clones turned on the Jedi and the Empire rose to power, he chose Dagobah specifically because it was a non-existent planet. The Grand Master didn't stumble onto some random swamp world by accident or flee blindly into the Outer Rim hoping to avoid detection. He selected a location that had already been scrubbed from official records, a planet that, according to Jocasta Nu's own logic, did not exist. He used the very system of institutional concealment that someone else had created for his own protection. This reveals something crucial about Yoda's understanding of secrecy. The precedent for this kind of erasure was established clearly in Attack of the Clones. When Obi-Wan searched for the ocean world Kamino, he found nothing. The gravitational readings indicated a planet should exist in that location. The stars were being pulled by something massive, but the archive showed empty space where Kamino should have been. Obi-Wan brought this anomaly to Yoda, expecting surprise or concern. Instead, Yoda's response was measured, almost casual. He simply observed that someone had erased the information, as if this were a known possibility rather than an unthinkable violation. His familiarity with archive tampering suggests this wasn't the first time he'd encountered it, or perhaps not the first time he'd used it himself. The implications are significant. If Yoda understood how to erase information from the archives, if he knew that planets could simply vanish from official records, then he also knew how to make his own homeworld disappear. The same techniques that Dooku used to hide Kamino could have been applied centuries earlier to hide a far more important secret. Yoda had centuries of access to the archives, the authority of the Grand Master, and relationships with every chief librarian who served during his tenure. If he wanted information to vanish, he had the means to make it happen. The question is, why would the Grand Master go to such lengths to hide where he came from? Frank Oz, who originated the role of Yoda in The Empire Strikes Back, preserved notes from the character's creation that offer a rare glimpse into his backstory. According to Oz's original 1980 production notes, Yoda came from a gentler world. That detail has never been expanded upon in any official source, as the world was never named and its location was never hinted at. But the description itself is significant. A gentler world suggests a place of peace, perhaps a civilization that chose isolation over galactic involvement, a people who preferred quiet existence over the conflicts that define most of galactic history. If Yoda's people intentionally separated themselves from galactic society, revealing their location could expose them to dangers they had spent generations avoiding. Species that could not defend themselves were often conquered, enslaved, or absorbed into larger powers. But Yoda's species wouldn't be vulnerable. They would be something far more dangerous to reveal. Valuable. The third piece of evidence comes from a pattern that spans centuries. Only 3 members of his species have ever appeared in Star Wars canon: Yoda, Yaddle, and Grogu. All 3 were connected to the Jedi Order. Yoda served as Grand Master for centuries, the highest position in the entire Jedi hierarchy. Yaddle held a seat on the High Council during the final years of the Republic. Grogu was a Temple youngling who survived Order 66 and was later discovered by Din Djarin. Every known member of this species possessed extraordinary force sensitivity, not just moderate talent or above-average potential, but extraordinary power that manifested from their earliest years. Grogu, despite being developmentally equivalent to a toddler, could lift massive creatures with the Force, heal mortal wounds, and even use abilities that full Jedi Masters struggled to perform. In The Mandalorian, he demonstrated Force powers that shocked everyone who witnessed them, from lifting a mudhorn to choking enemies to healing fatal injuries. Similarly, Yaddle was powerful enough to earn a council seat and serve alongside Yoda during the final decades of the Republic. And Yoda himself was considered the greatest Jedi of his era, possibly the greatest in the Order's entire history, capable of dueling Sith Lords and lifting starfighters with apparent ease. And not one of them has ever spoken publicly about their origins. This consistency across 3 individuals, spanning centuries, suggests either a cultural prohibition against discussing their homeworld or deliberate coordination to protect it. 3 beings, separated by hundreds of years, all maintaining the same silence about the same subject, is not a coincidence, but policy. The fourth piece of evidence of Yoda's secrecy comes from what happened when others tried to reveal information about his species. George Lucas established strict rules about Yoda's origins that extended across all Star Wars media. In a 2005 Moviefone interview, Lucas explained that he never developed a backstory for Yoda, deliberately keeping the character a mystery with no background, no species name, and no homeworld. Lucas's approach became official Lucasfilm policy and actively discouraged anyone in the expanded universe from exploring Yoda's backstory, his species, or his origins. Writers who wanted to develop stories about his background were told this territory was off limits. The most striking example involved a trading card that depicted a group of beings resembling Yoda gathered around an altar with a statue of their kind. The image showed what appeared to be a religious or cultural ritual, with 5 members of the species in various poses of reverence or meditation. One figure appeared to levitate, radiating power while the others watched. It was the first and only glimpse of Yoda's species as a society rather than isolated individuals. For a brief moment, fans might have learned something about how his people lived, what they believed, how they related to each other. Lucasfilm pulped the entire print run. The cards were recalled and destroyed before fans ever knew they existed. Whatever information that image might have revealed, whatever context it might have provided, was intentionally erased from the official record. No other species in Star Wars history has been protected with such extreme measures. Wookiees have documented homeworlds, detailed cultural histories, named leaders, and significant historical events. Twi'leks have entire story arcs devoted to their planet and their struggles. Even the most mysterious species in the galaxy have some canonical information available for fans who want to learn more. But Yoda's kind remains hidden by intentional, active enforcement. Every time someone has tried to reveal details about Yoda's origins, Lucasfilm has intervened to stop it. The fifth and final piece of evidence comes from Dave Filoni, who worked alongside Lucas for years on the Clone Wars and maintains this tradition to this day. In interviews, Filoni has stated directly that he knows backstories about Yoda's species, details that have never been revealed publicly, as Filoni has confirmed that actual information exists, including stories and contexts that could answer questions fans have been asking for over 4 decades. But he considers it not his story to tell. He respects Lucas's original vision for the character's mystique and refuses to break that trust, even when fans press him for answers, even when revealing those details might generate enormous interest and publicity. This is crucial because the information actually exists, as Filoni has confirmed, but it remains locked away, protected at the highest levels of Lucasfilm's creative leadership. When asked about whether fans would ever see Yoda's home planet, Filoni responded that revealing it would mean a large part of the fun goes right out the window. He treats the mystery itself as essential to the character, as fundamental to who Yoda is as his green skin or his distinctive speech patterns. But there's another way to interpret Filoni's guardianship. He's not just protecting a creative mystery, but honoring a deliberate choice that George Lucas made, a choice that mirrors Yoda's own behavior in the story. Just as Yoda refused to reveal his homeworld to the Jedi Council, Lucasfilm refuses to reveal it to the audience, meaning the secrecy in the real world reflects the secrecy within the fiction. Based on the evidence presented, what conclusions can we draw about why Yoda kept his homeworld secret? Yoda may have understood something that most beings in the galaxy never considered. Certain secrets need to be kept because, once revealed, they cannot be hidden again. For over 800 years, the Grand Master protected his people's location by never speaking it aloud, never writing it down, and ensuring that even the Jedi archives held no record of where he came from. He lived through the Republic's rise and fall, watched the Jedi Order grow powerful and then collapse, and witnessed the Empire hunt his fellow Jedi to extinction. Through all of it, he never once revealed his homeworld. The evidence suggests he did this not out of shame or personal preference, but out of protection. His silence protected a people who chose to remain hidden from a galaxy where Force-sensitive beings were constantly targeted for recruitment, exploitation, or elimination. Every day that Yoda refused to answer questions about his origins was another day his world remained safe from those who would exploit his people. The Grand Master understood that some knowledge is too dangerous to share, and for 8 centuries, he proved he could keep a secret.
His own students noticed the silence. One of them, after spending decades at his side and falling to the dark side himself, came to believe his master had kept far more from the Order than just a home world.
Count Dooku's private speculation reveals a belief based on a misunderstanding. The Legends novel Labyrinth of Evil by James Luceno documents the Sith Lord's thoughts during the Clone Wars. The passage describes his surprise at Geonosis, where Yoda's easy handling of Sith lightning caught him off guard. This surprise made Dooku wonder whether his former master had delved into the dark arts across 800 years, if only to familiarize himself with his perceived enemy. The specific phrasing matters considerably. Dooku frames this as wondering, not knowing, showing speculation rather than certainty. He imagines Yoda studying darkness to understand enemies, not embracing it for power. But something planted this dangerous idea in Dooku's mind decades earlier. A single conversation 63 years before the Clone Wars provided the foundation for this misinterpretation. The Legends novel Yoda: Dark Rendezvous by Sean Stewart reveals the crucial moment through flashback. Young Dooku sat with Yoda beside the ornamental pond in the Jedi Temple Gardens one evening, contemplating his upcoming departure for his first solo mission. He felt unusually heavy that night, as if realizing for the first time how easy it would be to sink into the Force's dark depths. Their philosophical discussion turned to the nature of the Force itself. Dooku spoke about how the Force runs through all life, high and low, great and small, light and dark. He stopped awkwardly after mentioning light, but Yoda finished the thought for him. The ancient master acknowledged that he had felt the touch of the dark across his long life, asking what mistakes a soul as great as his could make in 800 years. When the shocked apprentice could only stare, Yoda revealed his answer through laughter and a poke of his cane. Many mistakes, he explained, before growing serious with a warning that the dark side is mightiest in the mighty. This admission greatly altered everything the young Jedi understood about his master. The Grand Master of the Jedi Order had just acknowledged feeling the touch of darkness directly, not merely resisting temptation from a distance. Yoda explained that the Force includes darkness as part of existence, but added the crucial warning that his apprentice should not study it too closely, though Jedi must know it exists. That final phrase about necessary knowledge versus dangerous obsession contained the seed of everything that would follow. However, young Dooku's earlier training had already made him vulnerable to misunderstanding these words. The canon audio drama, Dooku, Jedi Lost, by Cavan Scott, reveals critical context about influences on the young initiate. During his training, Dooku encountered Jedi Master Lene Kostana, who believed the Order must actively prepare for potential Sith threats. Kostana searched for Sith relics scattered across the galaxy, and studied forbidden materials like the bestiary of Darth Kaldoth, despite the Council's disapproval. Though she would later choose Dooku's friend Sifo Dyas as her Padawan while Yoda selected Dooku, her unusual approach left a lasting impression. She argued that younglings should be trained to identify and combat darkside artifacts, believing the Jedi were dangerously unprepared. Though the Council dismissed these concerns as unnecessary, considering her methods too close to dangerous territory, this exposure established a dangerous belief in Dooku's mind. Dedicated Jedi could apparently study darkness if it served a greater purpose. He watched Kostana break Council rules to research the enemy, learning that defeating evil sometimes required understanding it deeply. Years later, when Yoda acknowledged feeling darkness across 8 centuries and stated that Jedi must know it, the combination created a pattern. Perhaps exceptional individuals could walk closer to darkness than others without falling. Written evidence from Dooku's youth reveals this pattern developing over time. The in-universe training manual, The Jedi Path, contains handwritten annotations from both Yoda and young Dooku that document this dangerous progression. Yoda reviewed the book around 115 BBY, and Dooku received it from his master, Thame Cerulean, owning it from approximately 89 to 82 BBY. The young Padawan read Yoda's notes throughout his training, absorbing every word. On a page discussing the Sith's supposed defeat after the Battle of Ruusan, Yoda had written a marginal note acknowledging that he sometimes sensed darkness and that Jedi must remain vigilant. Directly below this, young Dooku added his own observation about idle rumors suggesting the Sith survived under the rule of 2, one master and one apprentice. Another page discussed holocrons in the Jedi archives, and Dooku noted that his classmate had stolen a Sith holocron temporarily, observing that Jedi information resources were not as secure as the Council believed. He added another note questioning whether Sith holocrons revealed their secrets to just anyone, implying that certain individuals could access them. These annotations reveal a young Padawan tracking patterns of those who engaged with darkside materials. To someone already fascinated by forbidden knowledge, these pieces suggested that exceptional Jedi could engage with darkness more directly than others. Years of growing doubt would twist these memories into permission to abandon everything the Jedi stood for. Dooku grew increasingly troubled by what he perceived as corruption throughout the Jedi Order and the Republic it served. He believed the Jedi had become tools of a broken government, enforcing laws that perpetuated injustice rather than preventing it. Eventually, he left the Order entirely, returning to his homeworld Sereno to claim his family title as Count. From there, he fell to the dark side, becoming Darth Tyrannus, apprentice to Darth Sidious. From this new position as a Sith Lord, having crossed every line Yoda warned about, the fallen Jedi reconsidered those old conversations. The memory of Yoda acknowledging darkness transformed in his mind. Perhaps Yoda had done more than simply feel the dark side across 8 centuries. Perhaps he had studied it deliberately, like Costana studied artifacts, and that hidden research explained his extraordinary wisdom. This reinterpretation shows how perspective alters memory. What Yoda actually taught was vigilance and honest self-awareness. What Dooku now remembered was permission and precedent. The speculation crystallized during the Clone Wars after a specific encounter triggered the memory. Labyrinth of Evil documents Dooku's thoughts, forming years after his fall. During the battle on Geonosis, Dooku fought his former master directly, hurling Sith lightning at the ancient Jedi. Yoda deflected the attack with surprising ease, parrying the dark side technique as if he had trained specifically to counter it. This unexpected skill planted a question in Dooku's mind. The text states that Yoda's easy handling of Sith lightning made Dooku wonder whether the Jedi Master had delved into the dark arts across his 800 years, if only as a means of familiarizing himself with his perceived enemy. The passage then connects this speculation to a more recent memory. Dooku recalled that on Vajun only months earlier, Yoda had admitted carrying a darkness within himself. This statement became the confirmation Dooku needed. In his mind, carrying darkness within meant studying dark techniques, not simply experiencing the internal struggle every Force user faces. The fallen apprentice mistook feeling darkness for studying it, turning self-awareness into proof of training. Yet, when master and former student finally confronted each other face to face, Dooku never spoke this accusation aloud. If Dooku truly believed Yoda had intentionally studied the dark side like Costana researched Sith artifacts, this moment offered the perfect opportunity to expose that hypocrisy. He could have accused his master of following the same path he now condemned. He could have pointed out that Yoda's wisdom came from the same forbidden study Dooku now practiced openly. However, he said nothing of the sort. Their conversation remained focused on philosophy and competing views of the Force. Dooku argued that embracing both light and dark represented true balance. On the other hand, Yoda rejected this interpretation completely. Neither spoke of Yoda personally engaging with darkness beyond acknowledging its existence. The speculation remained locked entirely in Dooku's private thoughts, never voiced to anyone. This silence reveals something crucial about the belief itself. The wondering appears only in his mind in Labyrinth of Evil, framed with uncertainty, used to justify his choices when no one else could hear. Even Dooku himself remained unsure. He wondered whether it might be true. He believed it could explain Yoda's extraordinary abilities. He never claimed it as definite knowledge because he possessed no actual evidence. The word perhaps that prefaced his speculation betrayed the absence of proof. Canon sources prove Dooku's interpretation wrong from an entirely different angle. The Canon Clone Wars animated series episode Sacrifice documents Yoda's spiritual journey to learn the secret of maintaining consciousness after death. During this quest, the dark side itself actively attempted to corrupt him through visions. Darth Sidious and Dooku used ancient Sith techniques to project their power across the galaxy, targeting Yoda specifically. They offered him forbidden knowledge directly, promising to reveal the identity of the Sith Lord in exchange for giving in to darkness. They tempted him with power, suggesting he could gain strength beyond imagination by accepting their teachings. Without hesitation, Yoda rejected every offer. He stated plainly that the Sith had nothing to show him, refusing to engage with their promises. In the final test, they presented him with a terrible choice through vision, offering him the chance to learn who the Sith Lord was in exchange for allowing Anakin Skywalker to perish. Regardless, Yoda responded that he would not be tempted, and that he was ready to sacrifice everything rather than accept knowledge purchased through darkness. Sidious concluded that they had failed to break Yoda's will, acknowledging that his strength proved too great for corruption. This episode demonstrates Yoda facing explicit offers of dark side knowledge and consistently refusing them. This was not a philosophical discussion about whether darkness exists. It was a direct temptation with specific techniques and information, which Yoda rejected. The contrast with Dooku's speculation could not be clearer. The fallen Jedi imagined Yoda studying darkness in secret. Instead, his former master refused it even when offered directly. The distinction between what Yoda taught and what Dooku heard reveals where the misunderstanding occurred. Yoda acknowledged that darkness exists as part of reality. He admitted feeling its pull across 8 centuries. He explained making mistakes during that time, showing honest self-awareness rather than claiming perfection. He warned that Force users must know that darkness exists, meaning they should understand its presence and nature, not that they should train in dark techniques. He specifically cautioned against studying it too closely, establishing a clear boundary between necessary awareness and dangerous obsession. This teaching described the internal struggle every Force-sensitive individual faces throughout life. Darkness pulls constantly at those connected to the Force. The challenge lies not in avoiding knowledge that darkness exists, but in consistently choosing light despite feeling that pull. Yoda's wisdom came from 8 centuries of making that choice repeatedly, from experiencing darkness and refusing to embrace it day after day, decade after decade, century after century. Dooku interpreted this entirely differently because he approached the question from a Sith perspective. The Sith pursue power through intentional study of darkness. They learn techniques that channel negative emotions. They research methods to dominate others through Force abilities. They seek knowledge that increases personal strength regardless of moral cost. Dooku assumed his master must have followed a similar path to achieve such wisdom, because that framework was the only one he understood after his fall. This assumption reflects Sith thinking, where power comes from accumulating forbidden knowledge and mastering dangerous techniques. Jedi wisdom operates on different principles. It comes from experience rather than study, from mistakes rather than research, from choosing correctly rather than knowing more. Yoda's understanding of darkness came from feeling it constantly and rejecting it consistently, not from practicing dark abilities or researching Sith methods. The fallen apprentice could not grasp this distinction because his own pursuit of power depended on studying what the Jedi refused to practice. The truth about what Yoda actually did stands in complete opposition to Dooku's speculation. Yoda felt the touch of darkness across 800 years of life. He chose the light every single time that choice presented itself. He made mistakes, as all living beings do, but learned from them and continued choosing correctly. He acknowledged that darkness exists within everyone because honesty about internal struggles proves crucial for avoiding corruption. He warned his apprentice against studying darkness too closely because he understood the danger inherent in fascination with forbidden knowledge. None of this describes studying dark side techniques. It describes self-awareness, vigilance, and constant choice. The fallen apprentice, viewing these teachings through the lens of his own corruption, reinterpreted honest acknowledgement as evidence of secret training. Yet every source demonstrates this reinterpretation was false. Dooku's fall came from believing exceptional individuals could study darkness without succumbing to it. The difference between master and fallen apprentice was not that one studied darkness while the other abstained. The difference was that one chose light consistently across 9 centuries, while the other chose power, then constructed a narrative suggesting his master had walked a similar path to justify that choice. Dooku's speculation reveals more about his own need for validation than about Yoda's actual practices. It demonstrates how fallen Jedi reinterpret their past to make their betrayal seem less catastrophic, transforming their master's honest teachings about struggle into permission for forbidden study.
Dooku's belief was wrong, but it raises a different question worth answering. If Yoda had taken the path his apprentice imagined, if he had turned to the dark side after 900 years of mastering the light, what would that version of him have actually looked like?
The power comes from what the dark side offers: immediate, tangible enhancement. When Luke Skywalker asked if the dark side was stronger, Yoda explained in the Empire Strikes Back film that it was quicker, easier, and more tempting. The dark side delivers power faster than the light side, which gives immediate advantages in combat and crisis. That enhancement would amplify what Yoda already possessed. Light side Yoda already demonstrated extraordinary power throughout his life. When he lifted Luke's X-Wing from the Dagobah swamp using only the Force, he moved a multi-ton starfighter from the murky depths to dry land. Yoda stood on a tree root, effortlessly gliding tons of metal and machinery through pure Force concentration. The dark side would take those same abilities and weaponize them. The dark side channels aggression, hatred, and pain into raw Force energy. A Yoda who embraced these emotions would combine centuries of technical expertise with the dark side's explosive amplification. When light side Yoda redirected a falling missile in Sean Stewart's novel Yoda, Dark Rendezvous, he gently touched it to send it away from a chateau. Dark side Yoda would simply crush the missile mid-flight or hurl it back at his enemies. Feats that required calm concentration on the light side could be achieved through pure fury on the dark side, making them faster and more destructive in the short term. His combat abilities would be equally transformed. In the Revenge of the Sith film, light side Yoda fought Emperor Palpatine to a standstill in the Senate chamber. A dark Yoda, unrestrained by Jedi ethics and fueled by rage, might have overwhelmed Palpatine entirely. His small size, which he used defensively, would become an offensive advantage. Opponents would face a nearly impossible target moving with Force-enhanced speed and striking with centuries of saber mastery. Beyond direct combat, Dark Side Yoda would gain access to abilities that Light Side Jedi cannot use. Force lightning, Force choking, and other offensive techniques would become available. With his exceptional control and understanding of the Force's nature, he could master these powers quickly. Where it took Vader years to develop his choking technique, Yoda would perfect it in weeks or days. His knowledge of anatomy from teaching countless younglings would let him target vital organs and neural pathways with deadly accuracy. Perhaps most dangerous would be his influence over others. Yoda trained thousands of Jedi throughout his life. He understood how people think, how they learn, how they resist, and how they break. The novel describes teaching as entirely instinctive to Yoda, an impulse as natural and automatic as breathing. A dark Yoda could corrupt Jedi with frightening efficiency, knowing exactly which words to use, which doubts to exploit, which temptations would prove irresistible. Every Jedi he taught, every Padawan he trained across centuries, would become potential targets. Seeds of doubt planted long ago could be activated with a single word. The Jedi Order would face an enemy who knew all their techniques, all their philosophy, and all their weaknesses. That knowledge extended to large-scale warfare as well. Light Side Yoda rarely used battle meditation, but a dark version would employ it without restraint. This ability allows Force users to influence the morale and coordination of entire armies. Whole fleets could be paralyzed with fear or driven to reckless aggression, while ground forces collapsed into confusion. The Grand Master's presence would decide battles before the first shot was fired. All these advantages together mean the opening months of a Dark Yoda's reign would present an unparalleled threat. The Jedi Order could not stand against their former Grand Master, and if the Jedi fell, no military force in the galaxy would dare intervene. Unlike other Sith, Yoda would have no immediate visible weaknesses. Palpatine needed to hide his identity. Dooku faced political constraints, and Vader's severe injuries required constant mechanical support. Dark Yoda would arrive as a complete package. Master warrior, perfect manipulator, and legitimate authority figure who had earned respect across thousands of worlds. For weeks, perhaps months, he would seem unstoppable. However, the dark side always extracts a price, and the Sith themselves understood what that destruction would look like. The dark side consumes what it touches. In the Clone Wars episode Sacrifice, Yoda faced a vision where Darth Sidious, the future Emperor Palpatine, tried to corrupt him. The vision offered Yoda exactly what he desired most, the power to save Anakin Skywalker and defeat the Sith permanently. Yet, he refused. Sidious later admitted to Count Dooku that they had failed to break Master Yoda, acknowledging his strength made him impossible to turn. Yoda rejected the dark side through understanding, not ignorance. The series also showed him facing a physical form of his own darkness. The shadow grew aggressive and mocking, demanding to know why Yoda hated what gave him power. He first tried to reject it completely, but the Force priestesses explained that denying the dark side simply gives it more power. Yoda's strength came from accepting the shadow as part of himself while keeping control over it through patience and training. Fully giving into the dark side would mean abandoning that control entirely. The dark side offers quick power, but demands constant fuel from suffering, anger, and hatred. Yoda's self-sufficient mastery worked on completely different principles, and the corruption would not happen all at once. Yoda explained to Luke that once someone starts down the dark path, it dominates their destiny forever through gradual consumption. The first use of Force lightning would feel like power, the second would feel necessary, and the third would feel natural. Each act of aggression would make the next easier, lowering the threshold until casual cruelty became an automatic response. This corruption would blind him to consequences. Luceno's work reveals how Yoda and the Jedi Council would double their meditation sessions trying to peer into the future, only to discover it was clouded and unknowable. A corrupted Yoda would lose one of his greatest abilities, sensing outcomes before they occurred. The Force would still flow through him, but twisted into a distorted lens showing only what fed his anger and ambition. Each lost ability would speed the decline of others. Without foresight to avoid traps, spiritual connection to preserve warnings, or the ability to sense true intentions, paranoia would replace wisdom, and the apprentice's betrayal would become inevitable. Within years, these losses would build on each other until complete collapse. By losing control, the dark side would rob him of his greatest achievement, spiritual immortality. The Force priestesses revealed that only a few Jedi could stay conscious after death. On Moraband, an ancient Sith planet, ghost-like forms of dead Sith warriors told Yoda there was no life after death, only nothingness fueled by fear and hunger for power. The Sith worldview centered on taking power from fear and death, with no continuation beyond physical life. A dark Yoda would face complete extinction instead of spiritual survival. Physical death would come faster than spiritual death. The rule of two, the Sith's doctrine of having only one master and one apprentice at a time, exists specifically because Sith keep killing each other. Darth Bane, an ancient Sith Lord who appeared to Yoda in a vision, explained that the Sith had killed each other as victims of their own greed. From the ashes of that destruction, Bane chose to pass his knowledge to only one apprentice. The Darth Plagueis novel confirms this inevitability. Even the most powerful Sith Lord, who can control midichlorians and extend life, was killed by his own apprentice while he slept. Sith Lord Gravid, who tried to merge light and dark side teachings, met the same fate after being driven mad by his attempts. Power attracts challengers in Sith tradition, and a corrupted Yoda would face the same inevitable betrayal no matter how strong he was. The dark side would also accelerate Yoda's physical decline. By age 900, Yoda was nearing his natural limits. Stewart's novel Yoda, Dark Rendezvous portrays him feeling the weight of age and war. The light side had sustained him for 9 centuries, but he was approaching the end of even his extraordinary longevity. The dark side visibly destroyed Emperor Palpatine's appearance and Darth Vader's body, potentially reducing Yoda's remaining years to mere months. Yoda's species may not even be compatible with the dark side at a biological level. When the Jedi Council examined him in the Clone Wars episode Voices, they noted that a specific part of his brain was more active than any other Jedi they had seen. This unique brain structure, at nearly 900 years old, enabled exceptional Force sensitivity. This may suggest his species is naturally attuned to channeling life energy rather than destructive forces. Yoda explained to Luke that life creates the Force and makes it grow, describing a connection to living things that the dark side fundamentally opposes. Where the light side draws power from creation and growth, the dark side feeds on death and decay. The Force priestesses confirmed what his biology suggested. They revealed his destiny was already set. He would teach one who would save the universe from great imbalance. His species had not evolved for domination, but for preservation. Darkside corruption would not simply weaken this natural alignment, but sever his biological connection to the Force entirely, destroying the very physiology that made him powerful. His body itself appeared designed for light side channeling. His physiology worked as a living conduit for the Force, channeling life energy with extraordinary efficiency. The dark side's corrupting nature might damage this biological system entirely. Beyond his physical design, teaching defined his very nature. Yoda spent most of his time in the Jedi Temple with very young children, teaching through games and play, his small size an advantage when working with younglings. The dark side's philosophy of domination and destruction directly opposes this nurturing orientation. The contradiction between his biological nature and dark side requirements might create internal conflict that would destroy him from within. The mental deterioration would match the physical decay. In Yoda Dark Rendezvous, Count Dooku's answer to Yoda's old question about existence changed after turning to the dark side. The nature of beings became defined by complete isolation. This loneliness is not accidental, but inherent to the dark side's structure. Even the closest Sith partnerships are built on mistrust, with Plagueis explaining that jealousy and suspicion are intrinsic to their nature. Every conversation becomes a power game. Every gesture carries hidden meaning, and cooperation dissolves into paranoia. Yoda spent centuries building relationships through genuine trust and teaching, thriving on connections to thousands of Jedi, younglings, and the living Force itself. The dark side would sever these bonds systematically. Former students would become enemies, the Force would become a weapon instead of a companion, and teaching would transform into manipulation. Within months, the ancient Jedi who spent centuries surrounded by life and light would find himself completely alone, his greatest strength corrupted into devastating weakness. The core difference comes down to creation versus consumption. When Count Dooku explained the dark side's power, Yoda challenged him to make a rose. Dooku admitted the Force cannot create life from nothing, but Yoda stated that his Force does exactly that. The dark side can only consume and corrupt. Yoda's philosophy also accepted what the dark side denies. Loss is inevitable. He understood that what he loved would be taken from him eventually, and no power could prevent that. The dark side promises power over death, but this promise proves empty. In Darth Vader Issue 1 by Charles Soule, Palpatine reveals this limitation directly. Padme is dead, and even the power of the dark side cannot bring her back. Yoda counseled Anakin in Revenge of the Sith to train himself to let go of everything he feared to lose, teaching that attachment leads to jealousy and greed. This demonstrates Yoda's acceptance of loss as natural, where the dark side promises to prevent it, a lie Palpatine used to turn Anakin. Beyond failing to conquer death, the dark side demands absolute servitude. The Sith architect Momin explains in Darth Vader Issue 24 that the dark side does not serve its users, but rather users serve the dark side. Yoda's philosophy works in reverse, where the Force serves those who understand it. This creates an inescapable trap. Those who serve the dark side become enslaved, while those who try to control it face destruction. This philosophical difference shaped how Yoda wielded power. After failing to defeat Palpatine, Yoda went into exile to prepare Luke for the future rather than seeking revenge. He accepted defeat in one battle to enable victory in the larger war through patience and vision. The Sith feared him not for his combat abilities, but for his wisdom. The dark side would give Yoda everything except what made him truly dangerous: the ability to wait, to accept, to think beyond immediate victory. For a few terrifying months, the galaxy would face the most powerful Sith it had ever seen. Then, the apprentice would strike. The body would fail. The isolation would become unbearable, and another cautionary tale would join the long history of Sith who believed they could be the exception. Wisdom cannot be corrupted into strength. It can only be destroyed.
That same wisdom is the exact reason Palpatine hated him. Of every Jedi the Sith Lord had ever planned to destroy, Yoda was the one he could not corrupt, could not predict, and could not get past on the way to his empire.
The most striking aspect of Yoda's character was his complete resistance to manipulation. Palpatine understood desire and knew exactly how to exploit it. Anakin Skywalker craved the power to cheat death, to save the woman he loved from the visions that haunted him. Palpatine gave him that hope, and the Chosen One burned the Jedi Temple for it. Count Dooku wanted confirmation to justify his suspicions about the Republic's corruption. Darth Sidious offered him purpose and validated his doubts. Both men turned because the dark side offered something they desperately wanted. The Sith Lord's pattern of corruption repeated across generations. Find out what someone wants, become the only one who can provide it, then set the price before they can realize how much. Yet with Yoda, Palpatine faced an unexpected obstacle. In the canon film Revenge of the Sith, Darth Sidious doesn't even bother to negotiate when Yoda confronts him in the Senate chamber. He doesn't make any deals or promises of power, just immediate combat. The film's Legends novelization explores this further, revealing that the Sith Lord already knew that Yoda was beyond any manipulation. Because of this, he found no reason to waste his breath. The Legends novel Darth Plagueis demonstrates how Palpatine and his master studied the weaknesses of the Jedi Order, analyzing every vulnerability, every philosophical flaw, every point where attachment, doubt, or ambition could be twisted against them. Their grand plan took decades to execute, during which they identified which Jedi could be turned, which could be controlled, and which ones had to die. Yoda fell into the last category, not because he was the strongest, but because the Jedi Master had achieved an extraordinary level of discipline that rendered him immune to any form of seduction. The Clone Wars of canon continuity confirms this. In the episode Sacrifice, the Darkside trials at Moraband reveal another dimension of Yoda's resistance. Yoda confronts not just illusions of Sith Lords, but also a manifestation of his own dark side, his own potential for corruption. The Phantom takes Yoda's form and attacks him with his own fighting style and force abilities. What makes this trial significant is Yoda's response. He doesn't defeat his dark side through combat, but by acknowledging it exists and choosing not to let it control him. This acceptance without submission shows a spiritual superiority that Palpatine, who fully embraced his darkness, could never understand. The Sith philosophy requires surrendering to passion and power, but Yoda showed that true mastery meant recognizing temptation while remaining outside its influence. But the Jedi Master's endurance was only the first layer of what made Yoda especially dangerous. The Sith Lord who thrived in shadows faced an even more alarming problem. In reality, Yoda can read power games in an instant. It's been established that Palpatine's greatest strength was his ability to operate in plain sight. He nudged his puppets across the galactic board without them knowing they were part of his game. The Sith Lord shaped situations in a subtle way that his victims thought they were making their own choices. But Yoda was aware of the board. He just couldn't see who was moving the pieces. In the film Attack of the Clones, there's a revealing scene after the vote to create the Grand Army of the Republic. While other Jedi react with relief that the Republic now has a military to defend itself, Yoda tells Mace Windu that the shroud of the dark side has fallen, but that the future was difficult to see. The Legends novelization gives us Yoda's internal concerns. He is bothered by how perfectly everything is aligned. A clone army appearing exactly when needed was too perfect to be coincidental. Throughout the canon animated series The Clone Wars, Yoda's instincts kept pushing him toward uncomfortable truths. Along with Obi-Wan and Anakin, the ancient Jedi personally leads the investigation into Sifo Dyas and the clone army's true origins. Though the trail goes cold, Yoda's instincts tell him something larger and hidden was in control. Palpatine's master recognized this danger early. In the Legends novel Darth Plagueis, the ancient Sith warns his apprentice that Yoda has survived for centuries by understanding patterns that others miss. Yoda could sense wrongness in the Force. He could feel when situations were being engineered rather than naturally developing. And when Yoda advised caution, the Council listened. For Palpatine, that was the real danger. The Sith Lord needed the Jedi to be reactive, aggressive, willing to take shortcuts to win the war. But Yoda kept pumping the brakes. He questioned the Council's expansions of power and kept reminding them that their role was to serve the Force, not the Republic's political needs. This forced Palpatine to operate within tighter margins. He could manipulate individual Jedi, could set up battles and political crises, even arrange for Jedi to die in convenient ways. Darth Sidious had neutralized other threats. Qui-Gon Jinn was killed. Sifo Dyas was assassinated. Dooku turned. But Yoda forced him to work slower and take greater risks. The Jedi Master's sensitivity to the Force and his centuries of experience made him a formidable opponent. Naturally, Darth Sidious didn't want scrutiny to areas he needed to keep dark. For a Sith Lord who prided himself on perfect control, being compelled to alter his plans was unforgivable. Yoda's investigative instincts proved particularly dangerous to Palpatine during Fives' The Clone Wars storyline. When Clone Trooper Fives discovered the inhibitor chips and brought evidence to the Jedi, he nearly exposed Palpatine's entire conspiracy. Though Palpatine invented the appearance of an attack to discredit Fives, Yoda's presence on the Council meant the matter couldn't be completely dismissed. The ancient Jedi's questions about the chip's true purpose lingered, creating doubt that Palpatine had to carefully manage. While the Sith Lord successfully maintained the deception, the incident demonstrated how Yoda's probing wisdom could bring the grand plan to failure. Yoda's influence extended to the Jedi's relationship with the clone army itself. In the Clone Wars episode Ambush, Yoda is shown treating clone troopers as individuals rather than expendable resources, learning their names and emphasizing their value beyond their combat function. This perspective spread through the Jedi Order, with masters like Plo Koon and Anakin Skywalker forming genuine bonds with their troops. For Palpatine, this presented an unexpected complication. The grand plan required the Jedi to view clones as mere soldiers, making Order 66's betrayal a simple military execution. But Yoda's philosophy fostered relationships between Jedi and clones that created hesitation in some troopers during the Purge. While most clones executed their orders due to the inhibitor chips, the emotional bonds some developed with their Jedi generals caused psychological conflict that Palpatine hadn't fully anticipated. Commander Cody's visible regret after ordering fire on Obi-Wan, or Captain Rex's resistance to the chip's control, stem partly from the relational approach Yoda supported. The Sith Lord wanted disposable pieces on his board, but Yoda's insistence on dignity and individual worth introduced human variables into what should have been a perfect mechanical execution. More than that, the Emperor worked under a devastating constraint: time. He was racing against it. The Sith Lord had a mortal lifespan to contend with. Palpatine needed to destabilize the Republic, engineer a war, corrupt or kill the Jedi, and establish himself as Emperor before age caught up with him. Every year that passed without completing these goals was a year closer to failure. As Palpatine's political career advanced, his mounting frustration became evident in his decision-making. He did everything he could to accelerate events according to his timeline. Palpatine's fear of death drove him to seek Sith immortality techniques, the same knowledge he would dangle before Anakin Skywalker as the ultimate temptation. The Sith Lord's desperation manifested in increasingly reckless schemes, each intended to compress decades of careful planning into years or even months. His impatience became a weakness, forcing him to rely on backup plans that occasionally revealed his hand early. Meanwhile, Yoda had witnessed 8 centuries and remained vigorous. This basic difference in their relationships with mortality shaped every aspect of their conflict. Yoda's acceptance of the natural cycle allowed him to think in generational terms, understanding that the battle between light and dark extended far beyond any single lifetime. This perspective gave him strategic clarity that Palpatine, trapped in his mortal urgency, could never achieve. Indeed, the Jedi Master's patience extended beyond personal combat. When Qui-Gon presents young Anakin to the Council in the film The Phantom Menace, Yoda perceives danger and advises against training the boy. He doesn't demand immediate action or exile. He counsels patience and caution instead. The other Jedi, pressured by recent events and swayed by the prophecy of the Chosen One, overrule him. Yoda accepts this, waiting to see how the situation develops rather than forcing his judgment. Whenever Palpatine schemed to compel the Jedi to make hasty, compromising choices, the Jedi Master's patience interfered. This was because Yoda had trained Jedi for over 800 years. He established a legacy by transmitting the core knowledge every Jedi inherits. He trained Count Dooku, who trained Qui-Gon, who trained Obi-Wan, who trained Anakin. The master-apprentice lineage flowed through Yoda like ancient riverbeds. In canon continuity, Yoda had trained thousands of Jedi over 8 centuries, an estimated 20,000 by the time of his death. Each carried forward a philosophical framework that emphasized wisdom over power, service over ambition. This lineage created what Palpatine feared most, a self-replicating system of values that couldn't be destroyed by killing one individual. The Jedi Master's teaching methodology itself posed a unique threat to Palpatine's order. Unlike many Jedi, who focus primarily on combat training or force techniques, Yoda emphasized what he called learning to let go, the basic principle that views attachment as a lead-in to suffering. In the film The Empire Strikes Back, when training Luke, Yoda doesn't begin with lightsaber forms or force powers. He starts with failure, with lifting rocks, with facing fear in the cave. This pedagogical approach created Jedi who understood the Force philosophically before mastering it technically. Palpatine's corruption methods targeted Jedi through their attachment, Anakin's love for Padme, Dooku's frustration with the Republic, Barriss Offee's disillusionment with the war. But Yoda's students learned to identify attachment as a warning sign rather than a motivation. Even when Yoda's direct students fell, as Dooku did, they carried an understanding of what they'd lost. In Sean Stewart's Legends novel Yoda: Dark Rendezvous, Dooku admits to his former master that he still hears the ancient Jedi's lessons even decades after turning to the dark side, suggesting the corruption was never complete. This meant that even Palpatine's victories over Yoda's lineage were partial, haunted by the Jedi Master's teachings that couldn't be fully erased. This made Yoda unkillable in ways unrelated to combat ability. Eliminating him would create a rallying cry for every surviving Jedi across the galaxy. Palpatine understood fear as a tool, but he also recognized the danger of creating the wrong fear, the fear that ignites resistance rather than submission. However, allowing Yoda to live was equally impossible. In the canon film Attack of the Clones, Yoda's duel with Dooku demonstrated mastery that bordered on precognition, moving with complete unity with the Force. When Order 66 is executed in canon continuity, the clone troopers with Yoda on Kashyyyk attempt to kill him. The ancient Jedi not only senses it instantly, but he decapitates both troopers before they can cause him any damage. Palpatine's rage was enormous when he learned Yoda survived. The Sith Lord had organized the perfect Jedi purge, eliminated thousands of Jedi simultaneously, and yet the one Jedi whose death mattered the most slipped through his fingers. For this reason, as the Legends novel Dark Lord: The Rise of Darth Vader reveals, Palpatine became obsessed with Jedi survivors following Order 66. He sends Vader to hunt down every remaining Jedi because each survivor represents a potential for resistance. This went beyond the clutches of pride or the purpose of completing the grand plan. The Empire's legitimacy rested partly on the narrative that the Jedi were traitors who had grown corrupt and weak. At the same time, Palpatine also needed the galaxy to believe that challenging the Empire was hopeless. There was no room for the old ways in his new world because the Sith had proven themselves superior to the Jedi. But Yoda's survival contradicted all of that. This contradiction became even more obvious in how the Empire handled public information. Unlike other Jedi Council members whose deaths were documented and announced, Yoda's fate remained officially ambiguous. The Empire couldn't claim his death without proof, yet acknowledging his survival admitted defeat. In the canon novel Tarkin, it's revealed that Imperial intelligence compiled reports on potential Jedi survivors, with Yoda's status listed as unconfirmed. This forced the Empire into a defensive posture. They maintained the narrative of Jedi extinction while quietly hunting survivors, which undermined the image of absolute Imperial control. This question haunted Imperial propaganda throughout the Dark Times, creating space for hope among those who opposed Palpatine's regime. Without knowing it, Yoda cast his shadow over Palpatine's plans during the Clone Wars. The war was supposed to provide Palpatine the perfect environment to destroy the Jedi while pretending to be their ally. But Yoda's position on the Jedi Council meant that every military decision, every tactical choice, every Jedi general deployment required accounting for the Ancient Master's judgment. The Jedi's institutional arrogance played directly into Palpatine's hands. But Yoda stood apart from this flaw. In canon continuity's multimedia project, The High Republic, the Jedi Master had witnessed the Night of Sorrow, a devastating battle against the Path of the Open Hand cult centuries before the Clone Wars. He chose to hide knowledge of the Nameless, living weapons against Force sensitives, from the Jedi archives to protect the Order. This decision revealed Yoda's understanding that the Jedi weren't free from error, that some knowledge was too dangerous even for them. While other council members insisted the Jedi could handle any challenge, Yoda harbored no such illusions. He recognized the Order's weaknesses long before Palpatine exploited them. He simply refused to abandon Jedi principles as the solution. Palpatine's use of the Clone Wars as a psychological operation faced constant friction from Yoda's ethical framework. Yoda serves on the Jedi Council that oversees military actions. He approves Anakin's unusual measures, but the Jedi Master consistently raised questions about whether military victories justified the cost paid by clone troopers and civilian populations. This approach directly undermined Palpatine's goal of brutalizing the conflict enough to justify emergency powers. The Sith Lord needed the war to be savage and desperate, to corrupt the Jedi into making moral compromises. But Yoda kept pulling the Order back, insisting that how they won mattered as much as whether they won. This wasn't mere idealism, it was resistance to Palpatine's corruption campaign. Every time Yoda convinced the Council to choose a more ethical approach, he delayed the transformation Palpatine required for Order 66 to succeed completely. Throughout the war, Yoda also weakened Palpatine's ability to isolate and eliminate specific Jedi. Following Yoda's advice, the Jedi Council made deployment decisions collectively. This meant Palpatine couldn't just assign some troublesome Jedi to reckless, high-risk missions without arousing suspicion. He could still create dangerous situations, but Yoda's foresight meant these situations often had backup plans and support that kept Jedi alive longer than Palpatine wished. In the final months before the canon film Revenge of the Sith, Palpatine needed the Jedi scattered and vulnerable for Order 66 to work perfectly. But because of Yoda's supervision, Jedi were often deployed in pairs or groups with communication protocols and fallback positions. This didn't save most Jedi, but it helped some survive the initial purge. What Palpatine didn't know is that the Clone Wars forced Yoda into a spiritual crisis that he failed to exploit, revealing another dimension of the Jedi Master's resilience. In the final season of the canon animated series The Clone Wars, Yoda experiences Force visions showing him the future of the Jedi Order's destruction. Unlike other Jedi who might have been broken by such knowledge, Yoda sought to understand it. The arc titled Voices shows him hearing Qui-Gon Jinn's voice through the Force, leading to a journey to the Force planet where he confronts trials designed to test his deepest convictions. These trials, arranged by the priestesses of the Force, pushed Yoda beyond anything Palpatine could conceive. The Jedi Master faced his own pride, confronted manifestations of his past failures, and ultimately learned that true immortality comes not from defeating death, but from becoming one with the Force. This spiritual evolution occurred under Palpatine's nose during the height of the Clone Wars, when the Sith Lord believed he had the Jedi exactly where he wanted them. While Palpatine schemed to corrupt individual Jedi, Yoda was achieving a deeper understanding of the Force itself. The knowledge Yoda gained during these trials positioned him uniquely for the dark times ahead. Learning to commune with Qui-Gon through the Force meant the Jedi wouldn't be completely extinct even after Order 66. This Force Ghost technique, which Qui-Gon had partially mastered, would eventually be taught to Obi-Wan, and later allow both masters to guide Luke Skywalker. Palpatine's grand plan anticipated destroying the Jedi as a physical organization, but Yoda's spiritual advancement created a possibility the Sith Lord never imagined: Jedi who could persist beyond death itself. What made this particularly frustrating for Palpatine, had he known about it, was that Yoda's evolution happened through acceptance rather than resistance. The Jedi Master didn't fight against the visions of the Order's fall. He acknowledged that the future was uncertain, that the Jedi had grown arrogant, and that the catastrophe might be unavoidable. But rather than letting his knowledge lead to despair or desperate action, Yoda used it to prepare spiritually for whatever came. This acceptance represented the opposite of everything Sith philosophy taught. After Yoda vanished into exile on Dagobah, Palpatine's hatred found new expression. He couldn't kill Yoda, couldn't find him, couldn't even be certain how much danger the ancient Jedi still posed. So, he built an empire designed around the assumption that Yoda, or someone like him, might still be alive. In the Legends book Dark Lord: The Rise of Darth Vader, Palpatine initiated the Imperial Inquisitorius program, training darkside users specifically to hunt Force sensitives. These Inquisitors, armed with rotating double-bladed lightsabers, scoured the galaxy for Jedi survivors and Force-sensitive children. The program represented another response to Yoda's survival. If standard forces couldn't locate the ancient master, perhaps darkside users could sense him through the Force. The Emperor also poured resources into Sith artifacts and ancient darkside knowledge, seeking powers that might overcome even Yoda's mastery. Projects like the excavation of ancient Sith temples and the search for wayfinders to hidden Sith strongholds consumed vast Imperial budgets. All of this stemmed from one cold fact: Palpatine ruled the galaxy, but couldn't claim total victory while one diminutive Jedi Master remained beyond his reach. The canon Darth Vader comic series shows Vader's missions hunting Jedi survivors throughout the early Empire. But conventional hunting has its limits. Jedi can use the Force to stay concealed, blending into populations and avoiding detection. The Emperor needed tools that made hiding irrelevant. If he couldn't find the Jedi, he'd destroy entire planets where they might hide. This motivation started superweapons development. The canon novel Tarkin explores the Tarkin doctrine in detail, showing how the Empire's entire philosophy centered on superweapons that could destroy planets. But this doctrine goes beyond the scope of controlling populations. It concentrates on creating a galaxy where even the most powerful Force user can't threaten Imperial authority. The Tarkin doctrine explicitly states that fear of Force, rather than Force itself, will keep systems in line. This strategy reflects Palpatine's understanding that normal tactics had failed to capture Yoda. The doctrine represented a shift from hunting single threats to creating such overwhelming terror that resistance became impossible. The Empire's commitment to superweapons continued for decades. They also executed colossal kyber crystal mining operations and developed various experimental weaponry. The scale of these projects revealed the depth of Palpatine's obsession. Beyond the Death Stars, the Empire developed the World Devastators, the Galaxy Gun, and numerous prototype superweapons detailed in Legends continuity sources. In canon, projects like Operation Cinder demonstrated Palpatine's willingness to destroy Imperial worlds themselves if they failed to meet his standards. This went far beyond logical military strategy. A typical army could enforce Imperial rule effectively, as it had for years. But this required Palpatine to trust his subordinates, to rely on governors and moffs to maintain order in their sectors. The superweapon obsession reflected something deeper: the need for power that existed independently of loyalty, strategy, or even the Force itself. Technology could be controlled absolutely in ways that people, even darkside users, could not. A technological titan that can destroy entire worlds doesn't care about lightsabers or force abilities. It represents power that exists outside the choices or morality of living beings. In canon continuity, the Emperor's throne room on the second Death Star reveals another aspect of the inner battle Palpatine struggled with. He surrounds himself with the ultimate technological power, protected by thousands of troops and the most powerful battle station ever built. He's not just protected from rebellion, but also from Force users who might break into normal military defenses. This overinvestment had consequences. For one thing, the cost of the Death Star could have built thousands of Star Destroyers. For another, the secrecy required to develop planet-killing weapons created gaps in security that the Rebellion eventually exploited. The Empire's focus on technological terror rather than governance created the political instability that allowed rebellion to spread. Yoda remained a threat by his mere existence. Palpatine knew the Jedi Master was out there, that he might be training new students, or was quietly waiting for the right moment to strike. This uncertainty was the driving force behind creating an empire that even a Jedi as powerful as Yoda couldn't threaten. The irony is that Yoda wasn't planning some grand counterstrike. The Jedi Master's exile on Dagobah represented perhaps the most psychologically clever countermove in this long conflict with Palpatine. The Swamp World was strong with the dark side, due to a cave containing the residue of an ancient dark Jedi, as revealed in The Empire Strikes Back and expanded in various canon sources. This dark side presence served as camouflage, masking Yoda's light side signature from Palpatine's searches. But the choice of Dagobah revealed strategic thinking that went beyond mere hiding. By living in close proximity to dark side energy for nearly 2 decades, Yoda demonstrated he could endure corruption's presence without being consumed by it. More importantly, Yoda transformed his exile into a monastery of sorts, deepening his connection with the Force in ways that wouldn't have been possible in the bustling Jedi Temple. When Luke Skywalker arrived, he did not find a defeated refugee, but a master who had refined his understanding of the Force to its purest essence. Palpatine may have driven Yoda from galactic affairs, but in doing so, he accidentally gave the Jedi Master the solitude necessary to become an even more perfect expression of Jedi philosophy. In the movie Revenge of the Sith, the confrontation in the Senate chamber is one of the most symbolically loaded fights in the entire saga. The Sith Lord and the Jedi Master don't duel in the Jedi Temple or the Chancellor's office. They fight in the Senate itself, the image of the democracy Palpatine has just destroyed. Darth Sidious believes power comes from domination, from the ability to impose one's will through strength. On the other hand, Yoda believes power comes from harmony with the Force, from understanding patterns larger than individual ambition. And so, the duel wasn't about winning. It was a matter of proving which philosophy runs the galaxy. When Palpatine uses Force lightning, he's using the dark side's most distinctive power, which is the ability to harm through pure hatred and aggression. When Yoda catches that lightning and absorbs it, he demonstrates that the light side can endure what the dark side inflicts. In Legends continuity, the Revenge of the Sith comic adaptation shows additional details of their confrontation, including moments where they seem almost evenly matched despite Palpatine's raw power. The novel, also Legends, describes how Palpatine draws upon decades of Sith knowledge, channeling hatred accumulated through years of deception and manipulation. His lightning isn't only an attack, but also an expression of his philosophy that power means the ability to destroy. Yoda's response demonstrates centuries of discipline and understanding that true strength lies in resilience rather than aggression. The Senate chamber's vast space becomes their battlefield, with floating platforms representing the fragmented Republic. Each Force push sends Senate pods bolting through the chamber, physical manifestations of the political chaos Palpatine has directed. The architecture itself bears witness to their conflict, with every collision marking the death of democratic ideals. But the fight didn't end the way Palpatine imagined. Ultimately, Yoda retreats, and the duel ends without a clear victor. This denied the Emperor the symbolic victory he needed. More than wanting Yoda dead, he wanted the Jedi Master broken, defeated and proven inferior. It would have demonstrated to the entire galaxy that the Sith philosophy of power through domination was superior to the Jedi philosophy of power through harmony. The battle was about whether the galaxy would be ruled by fear or hope, by domination or balance. Palpatine won the immediate political victory, becoming Emperor and hunting Jedi to near extinction. But Yoda won the philosophical victory by proving the Jedi way could produce someone even the most powerful Sith Lord couldn't corrupt or destroy. For the next 2 decades, Palpatine ruled through the Death Star, through Vader, through countless Star Destroyers and Stormtroopers. He imposed his will on the galaxy through overwhelming force. But somewhere on Dagobah, Yoda lived in a swamp, teaching one student the old Jedi ways. The Emperor commanded billions, but the Jedi Master taught one boy about trusting in something larger than himself. When Luke Skywalker confronts the Emperor in the canon film Return of the Jedi, he rejects the dark side, despite every incentive to embrace it. He throws away his lightsaber and declares himself a Jedi, like his father before him. This moment physically represents Yoda's philosophy, and it's this philosophy that ultimately defeats Palpatine when Vader chooses redemption over the dark side. The hatred Palpatine felt for Yoda wasn't just personal. It was the hatred of someone whose entire worldview was challenged by another person's existence. The Emperor lived under the belief that the dark side was stronger, that the Sith understanding of power was correct. Superiority and fear were the true nature of the galaxy. Yoda was the symbol that contradicts these convictions. The Jedi Master was everything Darth Sidious could never be, content and at peace. Palpatine's hatred itself proved Yoda right, because it showed that the dark side could never truly defeat the light. It can only fight endlessly against it.
Yoda spent his last years training the only Jedi who would survive the Empire. The full story of Luke Skywalker, every step from the farm boy on Tatooine to the man who finished the Sith, is next.